of the voting procedure when we have
I'm good. Dear members of the commission, esteemed candidates, and all those observing our proceedings online, we are resuming the meeting after the break and moving to the final part of our work as commission members, the selection of the winner. Let me pause and say we had a host of technical and logistical issues that we needed to address before we resumed this session. So we're glad to be back and with you, and thank you for your patience. These past 4 months have been very intense for each of us, commission members, and for the candidates. And so I want to just walk everybody through how we got from 64 candidates down to 10 and how we will proceed from 10 to 1 this evening. First of all, the competitive selection for the head of the National Agency on Corruption Prevention is guided by Ukrainian laws and rules. And we started with 64 applicants. And with 64 applicants, we conducted a formal check. And the candidates whose packages did not comply with the requirements of the law were not accepted to participate in the selection. So that allowed us to go from 64 to 51 candidates. At the level of 51 candidates, we did a basic check of skills of candidates through a general skills test. And all candidates who passed an 107-point threshold were admitted to the next stage of the selection process. From 51, we went then to 24 candidates. The 24 candidates were put through a check on compliance with both integrity and professional competence criteria established by the law of Ukraine and by the criteria and methodology of assessment of the candidates, which has been approved by the Selection Commission. I will list now what the criteria were for the integrity check and how we were able to make this integrity check. First, we had information submitted by the candidates themselves. We had information submitted by NGOs and third parties. We had data received from state registers and authorities. We had written requests for clarifications to all the candidates, requests to authorities and organizations to verify information about the candidates, public integrity interviews with all 24 candidates, and then additional written requests to candidates, as well as information submitted by candidates voluntarily, and additional information supplied by state authorities. During this stage in our review process, we also conducted a check for professional skills and competence. This included a psychological test and interview conducted by the firm Symetrics. It included a reliability test conducted by the firm Symetrics. It included a practical legal case developed and assessed by Professor Kavrynyuk. It included a practical ethical leadership case developed by the Basel Institute of Governance, which were assessed individually by commission members. And finally, it included an evaluation of the candidates' submission of their strategic vision of the future of the National Agency for Corruption Prevention and certain questions that were developed specifically by the commission and then assessed individually by commission members. During this review of the 24 candidates, we also were able to conduct, with the help of the government, a special vetting process. The special vetting is based on the results of the integrity, and professional competence check, and the special vetting conducted by the government. The commission has divined by open vote the list of candidates who, in the opinion of a qualified majority of the commission members, comply with both criteria, integrity, and professional competence simultaneously. The fact that some of the candidates were not invited, some of the 24 candidates were not invited for final interviews did not automatically mean that they were non-compliant with the integrity criteria. So based on this level of evaluation, we were able to go from 24 candidates to 10 candidates. And over the past 2 days, we have conducted interviews of these 10 candidates that were finalists, in which we were able to talk to them about all of their qualifications, their vision, their particular experience that was relevant to the role of NACP head, and a host of other very helpful considerations. And now, at this point in the proceedings, we proceed to what is clearly the most difficult part, which is to choose from a list of very talented, very committed, very passionate, and very experienced candidates for this position, and we need to choose one candidate. So based on the results of the professional interviews, as well as the evaluation of the totality of the candidates' qualifications conducted, the commissioners will now define by open vote one winner of the competition, which will be submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine for further appointment. These 2 days of final interviews have been particularly rich and interesting and rewarding. I want to acknowledge that in my personal view, we are extremely fortunate as members of the Selection Commission, as we had the privilege to work with highly professional and interesting candidates and have an exchange in which I think we each individually learned a great deal. Each candidate is different with a unique set of qualities and advantages. We will now proceed to discuss the candidates, but before we do that, we need to address a couple of organizational matters and we need to add a certain item to the agenda. And that is, in particular, we need to separately consider and approve the commission's voting procedure to determine the competition's winners. Now, we are in this position, as you all know, because the law of Ukraine on the prevention of corruption under Article 6 stipulates to a procedure in which the head of the national agency shall be appointed in accordance with the results of an open competition selection. And the competition commission consists of 3 persons appointed by the cabinet of ministers of Ukraine and 3 persons appointed by the cabinet of ministers, 3 persons appointed by the cabinet of ministers of Ukraine on the basis of donor proposals, who provided international technical assistance in the field of preventing and combating corruption to Ukraine during the last 2 years before the expiration of the term of the office of the head of the National Agency of Corruption, Prevention of Corruption. So a decision, and this is important, of the Competition Commission is considered adopted only if 4 members of the Competition Commission voted for it at the meeting, including 3 members from among the persons determined on the basis of donor proposals, determined and who during the last 2 years, so from among the persons determined on the basis of donor proposals. So due to this legal requirement, we are on somewhat uncharted territory as a commission, and we need to determine a procedure for conducting the vote that will lead to the most open, transparent, and democratic type of discussion. And so over the past 2 days, we have worked very hard in the name of these important objectives and interests to develop a procedure, which I'm now going to turn to Commissioner Stefan to describe for the benefit of the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would like to introduce to our viewers the main elements of our voting procedure. In the first round, the Commission members will vote for each candidate who has undergone the final interviews. So everybody that we heard in the last 2 days will be subject to a vote in order to determine the competition winner. Each commissioner can vote. So in the way that we voted until now, yes or no for each candidate. The number of positive votes that is casted by each of us is unlimited. In order to have a winner, I remind you that we have to have a qualified majority, right? So 3 votes from the members of the Commission that have been proposed by the international donors, and at least 1 from the other side of the Commission. Therefore, we have 3 scenarios after the first round. The first scenario is that we have only 1 candidate that has a qualified majority. So 4 votes, or 5 votes, or 6 votes, out of which 3 belong to the representatives of the international donors in this commission. The second scenario is that we have multiple candidates that receive a qualified majority of yes votes. That means candidates that have 4 votes, 5 votes, or 6 votes, 3 of which belong to the representatives of the international donors. And the third scenario is that none of the candidates obtains a qualified majority of yes votes. So let's see what happens in each scenario. The first scenario is obviously the simplest one, where only 1 candidate has a qualified majority. That candidate becomes the winner of this competition, and no further voting shall be conducted. In the second scenario, where we have multiple candidates that obtain a qualified majority, all of them qualify in the second round. And then we go in describing what happens in the second round. If only 1 candidate obtains the highest number of votes and has a qualified majority, that candidate wins the competition and no further voting happens. If we have multiple candidates that obtain the maximum number of votes and have a qualified majority, a third round of voting will be conducted with these candidates. And the third option, if no candidate reaches the qualified majority, the next round will be organized between the candidates or candidate for the candidate that obtain the highest number of votes from the donor-nominated commission members. And in the next rounds, we repeat the same procedure with the same rules as for the second round. Scenario number 3, I remind you, this is the case where none of the candidates obtains qualified majority in the first round. What happens is that we will have a second round organized for the following candidates. The ones that obtain at least 1 yes from the donors nominated commission members, and or the candidates that obtain 3 yeses from all the 3 government nominated commission members. So these 2 categories go into the second round. What can happen? If only one candidate obtains the highest number of votes and the qualified majority, this candidate becomes the winner, no further vote takes place. If multiple candidates obtain the maximum number of votes and the qualified majority, we have a third round conducted with these candidates. If no candidate reaches the qualified majority, the next round will be organized for the candidates or the candidate who obtain the highest number of votes from the donor-nominated commission members. And we go on with the next rounds of vote, which follow the same rules. We have decided to tentatively put a limit at 5 in terms of the voting rounds. However, if during the last round of voting, none of the candidate attains the qualified majority of votes, or if we have multiple candidates with the same number of votes, including a qualified majority, the Commission may decide to supplement the number of voting rounds. If the Commission does not supplement the number of voting rounds after the 5th round, the procedure is concluded without determining a winner, and we have to start a new competition. During the voting, the Commission members cast their vote in alphabetical order, with the Commission chair voting last. You're already familiar with this procedure because we used it all the time, and the candidates are also voted in alphabetical order. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This concludes my presentation. I hope it is clear for everybody that we had to come and further detail the very general provision that we have in the legislation in the most democratic way possible. If there are any questions, we're here.
Well, Commissioner Stefan, thank you again for the very hard work that you put in to developing this idea with our support and with our input. I know it took a lot of effort, and I think, again, the reason for this is that Article 6 does not provide a lot of detail about how you can implement Article 6 in practice and also conduct an open, transparent, and democratic discussion during an open proceeding. And so we've endeavored over these past 2 days to make sure we could do that. So thank you again. In my opinion, the voting methodology suggested by Commissioner Stefan is clear and comprehensive. Dear Commissioners, if you do not have anything to add or amend or clarify, I believe we should go to a vote. Very good. Please raise your hand and announce your vote verbally in alphabetical order.
Tak.
Tak. Aye.
Tak. Tak.
Yes, 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 yes,
Thank you very much.
yes.
All 6 votes are in favor, and the voting procedure is approved as proposed by Commissioner Stefan. Now, as we move into the actual voting procedure, as you recall, at the conclusion of our final interview today, I urged each of the commissioners to spend some time alone to both reflect on what they've learned over the past 4 months, but also in the last 24 hours from what were very rich, nuanced, and sophisticated interviews and discussions with highly qualified professionals. And having asked them to do that, I'm now going to ask that we can spend a couple minutes just sharing our reflections as individual commission members about the criteria that we are about to use to exercise this very important vote. And I do this in the spirit that it's important for the community, the public, our fellow commissioners to understand more about how we will arrive at this decision, difficult as it is. So I will start by proposing to you and discussing for a moment both what I've learned over the past 24 hours and how this helps me shape my thinking about a decision of a future candidate. The other point I should mention is that if you watched the interviews, you already have a bit of a flavor for where each of the commissioners is coming from, what their perspective is, what's on their mind. And we do hope that you took the time to watch the interviews, because they will also point in a direction in terms of our respective individual priorities. For me, it starts with the fact that anti-corruption is not an end in itself, but a means towards a more affirmative state of end state for Ukrainian society that includes transparent governance, economic prosperity, protection of human rights, access to justice, and support of individual entrepreneurship, very much in the spirit of the revolution of dignity. And so I was looking for candidates who could articulate a vision based on the idea that we don't fight corruption just for its own sake, but we have a positive place where we want to land. And then secondly, I was looking for a candidate who understood that an institution like the NACP cannot actually be created by the law and can't be governed by the law itself. That an institution is a combination of people and values and processes and needs to grow organically. And so therefore I was looking for evidence in the interviews of individual leaders who understood the need to grow this young institution and help it mature and become a very robust, mature, and sustainable institution based on people, processes, and values. I was also looking for basic leadership skills, which we all know include good listening, authenticity of character, adaptability. I was looking for experience on the front lines of corruption, people who had actually invested in fighting corruption in the trenches, so to speak, and were whistleblowers or had learned from practice. We need practitioners in this role. And then I was looking for the ways to balance that frontline experience with an understanding of basic management, communication, team building, ways to provide an open door and access, and the ability, most importantly, to learn. And in some cases, even unlearn what they think they know, because the leader of the NACP has to lead a community of 400 people. And then I was looking for, and believe me, this is the hardest part, because each and every one of the 10 candidates has a unique contribution to make to the future of Ukraine's integrity as a nation. And so in some cases, you know, people who have great skill sets may not have the requisite amount of experience where I'm convinced they can sort of start on day one with all the challenges and be able to adapt quickly to those challenges. So while all the candidates to some extent were able to fill the criteria I've just described, some of them just have a little bit more experience and balance and the ability again to sort of start on day one running, if you will. And then finally, there's a tension in the NACP. We've discussed it. Each of the candidates articulated it in different ways. There's a tension in this organization between its punishment, monitoring, control functions around declarations of assets, around lifestyle checking, around conflicts of interest even, and the broader and more multidisciplinary and in some ways more difficult challenge of preventing corruption, of stopping it from happening in the first place. And so those were my metrics, and they, I think, will help explain why I vote the way I vote as we get into the voting procedure. So would anybody else, I mean, I think we should just go around and see in alphabetical order. Ala, would you like to express your views as to what you've been thinking about for the last several hours since we broke from the interview? And the last several months as well.
Дякую, пане Меттю.
Thank you, Matthew. When we came up to this stage, the final step, so to say, I had to think a lot. All our candidates, those who made it through to this stage, they are the best. They are the best of all we have seen so far. And the choice is really very difficult because all of them, they are professionals. They all are capable of making this difficult job. They're able to develop, to bring in changes, to change themselves. When I was thinking about it, I understood that all our candidates have demonstrated a high level of knowledge. As they gave us great strategic vision of the development of NACP, they were giving highly qualified answers to the questions during their interviews. This all is very important, as well as their leadership qualities that were demonstrated by them. They demonstrated the ability to manage the team, to be the team player, to communicate, interact, cooperate with state institutions, civil society, organizations. But apart from all these important qualities, positive qualities, it is also important when I was thinking about my choice, the sincerity, the ability to be sincere in their aspiration that will enable the new head of an ACP to be passionate in their work, to have a sincere desire to develop Ukraine as a progressive European country with zero tolerance to corruption. This kind of person I was looking for. Thank you.
Commissioner Ivanovska, Commissioner Kozlov.
Dear colleagues, when I was making my choice, I was thinking about the fact that any candidate can be perfect, as well as none of us is perfect. That's why I was looking for a combination of qualities that each person has, each person who we've seen as candidates, as professional, as someone who can continue the work of the agency without lowering the quality. These are my general considerations, but Speaking about the specific criteria I was guided by, I can name them and I can explain the way I was thinking and how I'm going to vote. Maybe it will give you a hint whom I'm going to vote for or a number of people I have chosen, but I think it's okay. And the people who are watching and listening to us right now and will be analyzing our work and will learn some lessons about how next competition should look like, not necessarily for this institution, maybe another institution. It will be important for them to hear my arguments. So we have an agency that was relaunched, that underwent, that had a difficult path. There were growth and some degradations, as audit shows. Same, except for degradation, could be, well, let's say ups and downs, right? This is what we can say about the head of an ACP. We have to tell that he managed to drag the agency out of stagnation, absolute stagnation, but the agency could have fly higher than the level it has, but due to certain reasons, they didn't manage to fly higher. So when I make my decision, I'm thinking about two possible scenarios for the agency development. First one, the work is continued by the people who set up the basis of the agency development, those who were creating the strategy and program of the agency and who, and it's a rare case, were able, by their work of implementation, the strategy and program, they were able to prove that they were developing these documents not just for the sake of making a document, not just to fulfill some kind of task and not just to satisfy some law requirement. These people were really working to make it the programs that could be implemented, and taking into account the results of the interviews we held, they could quickly pick up the work of the agency starting from today. I have no doubt they are able to do that. I asked a lot of very specific questions, professional questions, and very few candidates were able to give clear answers, clear, comprehensive answers, and to demonstrate that the existing system is not some kind of a dogma. It can be amended. There can be some interventions that would help corruption prevention and would make it easier for the people submitting their declarations, and we have over 1 million of them. Also, what was important for me, and I'm talking about all the candidates I'm going to vote for, it was important for me that I personally, my colleagues, I don't have any precautions about integrity regarding this candidate. I mean, serious precautions about integrity. It was important for me that this person is able to demonstrate high level of intellectual development and general intelligence, integrity, reliability of this person according to the tests should be within the admissible tolerance, and the tolerance rather shows that a person is eager to change the structure the person is working is. It was important for me that this person has solid legal understanding. The candidate shouldn't obligatory be a lawyer, but some basic understanding of the legislation that is used by the agency in its activity allows the candidate to make a difference between good proposals they will receive from their subordinates from not that good proposals, the feedback that the commissioners received from the co-workers of such candidate was also important from the subordinates in the first instance, because what your boss is telling about you is one thing, but what your subordinate is telling about you, the people who you were teaching, you were creating the conditions for work and development is important. It was also important for me to see that this person is able to deal with moral dilemmas. All this, the candidates can do that. The committee members had a possibility to see who is more confident in that however. Well, it was not an exam, but like the level of confidence of a person when the person is dealing with moral dilemma. And as to the strategic vision, it was very important for me to see that the candidate does understand this amalgam, how different functions of the agency are working together, not just tell them and tell all the stakeholders, but to make sure that candidate understands how different functions complement each other, how they can strengthen each other. Those are the general criteria I was based on in my decision. I have described one candidate already. Other candidate is the so-called fresh blood. Again, talking about this person, I would say this person has demonstrated the highest intellectual level, probably. At the same time, this candidate still has a space to develop further, especially about the understanding of the system, which is not dogmatic, and it shouldn't remain as it is. It should develop, and it should develop not in repressive thinking direction and witch hunting, but it should develop in a way that would enable agency to use the existing resources without focusing on small things, but being able to find big corruption and prevent big corruption. Also, I was choosing the candidate who is demonstrating high level of integrity, the candidate whom it was not one candidate like this, at least two of them were defending Ukraine with arms in their hands when invasion started. I will vote for the candidates who will be the new people for an ACP. The people who in their previous workplace demonstrated non-tolerance for corruption and some creative methods in corruption tackling. And I hope this candidate will be able, with time, to shift a little bit from their law enforcement background and use the creative methods not only in corruption tackling, but also in prevention. And with all these hopes and taking into account all these criteria, where our candidates have demonstrated one of the best results, not all of them, but most of them, I will give my vote respectively to the people I have described. Thank you.
Commissioner Kozlov, thank you for that very comprehensive and precise set of guidelines. Very helpful. Commissioner Onyshenko.
Дякую за надане слово. Вітаю всіх тих, хто дивиться нас.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to greet everyone who is watching us. I think we all have a chance to congratulate 10 people who made it to the final. It is already a big achievement. These people are finalists of the very complicated competition, and they have already demonstrated a lot of great qualities. And I would like to congratulate the committee members with having such a great top 10. I would say all of them are strong professionals. I would like to add to all these criteria that have been already mentioned. I would like to add that my personal criteria, all those whom we interviewed, they fall into three groups for me. The practitioners, pure practitioners who know very well what they are doing. Those who were theoreticians, people who have ideas, who build in the strategies and tactics for the future. It's very important as well. And third group, people who would combine two features. And for me, it is what determines my choice. I'm looking for a person who can combine good practical experience and brilliant theoretical ideas. So that's why I will be choosing people who I believe are like this. Also, I would like to mention, we have to admit that those who were performing their functions in certain positions, I feel sorry to take them away from there. They are great. And I'm thinking what their teams and their institutions will be doing there without them. And it's truth. Also, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that unfortunately, at this competition, there were not enough women. During our final interview, we had one woman, and I would like to congratulate her. Today is the day of Ukrainian woman, and I would like to congratulate her because she made it through this complicated competition. And I will be voting for people, as I said, who combine theoretical and practical component features. And this will be added to all the criteria dear commissioners have expressed already. Thank you.
Deputy Chair.
Дякую. По-перше, я хочу сказати,
Thank
що
you. First of all, I would like to say that we made a great journey, and it was a journey of 4 months for the candidates and committee members. It's a big honor for me to be among the colleagues who are in this committee today. I would like to thank each of you, first of all, for comfortable cooperation. I think we managed to combine a lot of things. We had a proper level of openness between us, the proper level of openness with the civil society, which is also important, some innovative approaches in committee work compared to other competition committees. And I think this is our achievement for sure. Speaking of my considerations, of course, all the tests, legal case, strategic vision, ethical case, psychological testing, general skills tests, they were very helpful to make up this puzzle of the candidate I would see as the head of an ACP. For me, the head of an ACP is a person who combines such qualities as professionalism, integrity, and ability to be an ethical leader. That's why I will vote for the candidates who, in my opinion, are equally good and correspond to the criteria I've mentioned and are equally good. Were equally good in all the tasks we were given them. At the same time, I would like to underline that the interviews that took place yesterday and today showed a high level of the candidates, and I think that new NACP can take a lot of ideas while watching these interviews. Actually, we discussed a lot of problems and the ways to solve them. That's why I think the mission of our committee and the result of this today is first of all educational result. It gives the society the understanding of what an ACP is doing, what problems are there, and also it's a guideline to collect some good ideas. So irrespective who is going to be elected as the head of an ACP, today I think good ideas that we've heard should be implemented and taken into account. Also, I would like to pay attention to monitoring question. The monitoring of NACP is very important. It showed a lot of existing problems, and I think it shows that the change of approaches is necessary, and reloading and fresh vision.
For me, it's important to see that the new head can be independent himself or herself, support the independence of the institution, and also have management skills. So when the next monitoring comes in, it shows results that are satisfying for international experts, for NACP, for the civil society, and me as part of the civil society.
Of course.
I think I missed one thing. It's very important, something that I focused on as well. This is honesty. Honesty when talking to the Commission on what the candidates were trying to tell us about themselves, about their life, and themselves during psychological testing, that the psychological profile was valid, and we could understand whether the candidate met the criteria for this ideal candidate that we had in mind, and then whether he or she were telling us the truth about their work and their methods and the number of people who they were managing. Of course, that had to match the information that Commission had because it had collected it. Again, this is positive selection. I think those who wanted to understand did so. Дякую, пане.
I would also like to start by thanking everybody that took part in this procedure. The candidates, the secretariat, the technical team, the commission members, last but not least, of course. And I want to say that there has been a lively debate these days as to the methodology of reaching who we consider should be the next winner, the next head of the NACP. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this is not a mathematic exercise. We're not adding figures, dividing them by X, and coming up with an automatic conclusion. Of course, we have had the CVs of the candidates. The candidates went to several types of testing, and I wouldn't go through all of them because they were already explained. But I think for me, what mattered was also the deep understanding of where NACP is now. The fact that the candidates got themselves accustomed to the audit that was performed, and I was fortunate to be part of that effort. And I think, I'm personally happy that I see it was a useful exercise, something that new potential leaders take into account when designing their plans for the future. But also in this determination, we used numerous interviews with stakeholders, people that have worked with the candidates that we have had before us. And we also ran numerous background checks, and we had in-depth integrity interviews. For me, what mattered are definitely the personal qualifications, and I also believe that legal knowledge is an important element, although we have to acknowledge you don't have to be a lawyer to be the head of the NACP. However, I think it's an advantage to understand what is being put before you. What also mattered for me was profound previous experience in areas related to the mandate of NACP, even if the candidates did not all come from the NACP, having experience in areas that are neighboring NACP was very important for me. What mattered also was the capacity of the candidates to be result-oriented and focus on delivering results. in a given period of time with the resources that are allocated to them. So not thinking of perfect worlds, but actually thinking of today and here. Managerial skills were very important to me, and resistance to pressure. Crisis management, preferably exemplified by practical examples, practical instances when they faced that. And the capacity to focus resources on key areas of work to achieve results. This is in relation to the result-oriented element. A deep understanding of the mandate of an ACP and of the concepts used in the work of an ACP, such as conflict of interest, for example, was also a key element for me. And the capacity to put in perspective the preventive and the combating side that, and the policy side that come together under the same roof of an ACP. And last but not least, the capacity to start day one. And be realistic about what needs to come first and understand that this institution needs to continue its work and to perfect it so that it becomes a reference in Ukraine and not only. I think what we're doing here is amazing in very difficult times. And I think it will become a model for other countries. So I think we should be proud of being able to conduct this procedure in a transparent manner during a very tough time for Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Stefan. So we are now going to proceed to the voting. We're going to vote each of the candidates in alphabetical order. And at the conclusion of each vote, I will announce the results, and then I will turn, once we have voted the full list of candidates for the first round, I will return to Commissioner Stefan to tell us where we go next under this agreed methodology and procedure for voting. I will also say that as we begin the actual voting, commissioners should feel quite free to explain their yes or no vote for each candidate or not, as they may see fit. There will be opportunities as we go through this process to do so, and we want to encourage everybody to take advantage of those opportunities and, most importantly, keep an open mind. Very good. So, dear commissioners, I believe we have reached, I'm now going to request that you vote in alphabetical order on each of the finalists. You may vote yes or no on each candidate. Please vote yes if you would like the candidate to be appointed as the head of the NACP. Dear commissioners, please vote on the approval of Andrei Vishnevsky as the head of the NACP.
Ні.
No.
Ні, nay.
No. No.
Ні.
No.
No.
No. I will now, the results of this vote on Andrei Vishnevsky is that he does not pass to the next round of voting. The next candidate, please vote on approval of Sergei Hupiak as the head of the NACP.
Так.
Yes.
Ні, nay.
No.
Так,
Yes.
так,
Yes.
No.
No. So there's three commissioners each voting for Mr. Hupiak.
If I may.
Please.
I don't think we have a final decision on Mr. Hupiak yet. We will see where we are at the end of the voting
Okay,
procedure.
yeah. So we will, let's
We will
agree
see
then.
which scenario
Yeah.
we are at the end of the voting
Yeah,
procedure.
let's just tally the votes. Let me pause here. this is a somewhat uncharted territory. We want to be as clear and communicate as well as possible. You now can see the table, if you're viewing this from online, of where we are in the voting process. So we will then review where we are at the end of the first round under this methodology before we make any determinations about who's qualified for the second round. Very good. Okay. Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Dmytro Kalmykov as the head of the NACP.
Ні.
No.
Так. Aye.
Yes. No.
Ні.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Katerina Kapliuk as the head of the NACP.
Ні.
No.
Ні. Nay.
No. No.
Ні.
No.
No.
Yes. Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Vitaly Nikulin as the head of NACP.
Ні.
No.
Ні. Nay.
No.
Ні.
No.
Ні.
No.
No.
No. Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Viktor Pavlushik as head of the NACP. I gotta repeat.
Так.
Let me repeat because I was not on the mic. Sorry. Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Viktor Pavlushik as the head of the NACP.
Так.
Yes.
Так.
Yes.
Так.
Yes.
Так.
Yes.
Так.
No.
Yes.
Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Alexander Skamarov as the head of NACP.
Ні.
No.
Ні. Nay.
No.
Ні.
No.
Ні.
No.
Yes. Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Alexander Starodubtsev as the head of NACP.
Ні.
No.
Ні.
No.
Ні.
No.
Ні.
No.
No.
Yes. Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Sergei Stepanyan as the head of NACP.
Так.
Yes.
Ні. Nay.
No.
Так.
Yes.
Ні.
No.
No.
No. Dear commissioners, please vote on approval of Artyom Kavanov as the head of NACP.
Ні.
No.
Ні. Nay.
No.
Ні.
No. No.
No.
No. Okay, Commissioner Stefan, as soon as you're ready, you can summarize where we are and how we proceed to the next round of voting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It seems that we are in scenario 3. where none of the candidates obtained a qualified majority. So nobody has 3 votes from the members that were proposed by the international donors, plus 1 vote from the rest of the commission. Therefore, we will qualify for the next round all the candidates that have at least 1 vote from the donor nominated commission members, and all the candidates that have all the 3 votes of the government nominated commission members. Therefore, for the next round, we have Mr. Serhei Hupiak, who has 3 votes from the members that are nominated by the government. Mr. Kalmikov Dmitro, Ms. Katerina Kapliuk, Mr. Pavluchik Viktor, Mr. Alexander Skomarov, and Mr. Alexander Starodubtsev.
So
If we could put back the
Yes, put the rules back up,
the
please.
rules for the scenario number
And
3.
you can, why don't you
You
resume?
cannot? Yes,
And then,
we have time.
then once they do, you'll explain where we
Yes.
are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are in the scenario number 3, and we go to the second round that includes the individuals and the individuals that I referred to earlier. What are the rules for the second round? If only, so of course we vote yes or no, as we voted in the first round. There's no limit as to how many votes in favor or against we can cast. If only one candidate has the highest number of votes and a qualified majority, this candidate wins the competition, and we will have no further voting rounds. If we have multiple candidates that have the highest number of votes and a qualified majority, then we have a 3rd round of voting for these candidates. If no candidate obtains a qualified majority, the next round of vote will be organized for the candidate or candidates that got the highest number of votes from the donor nominated commission members. So I think we can proceed with voting.
Very good.
Mr.
Very
President.
good. So, all right. So we start in alphabetical order, and I believe that means we start with Mr. Hupiak, correct?
Yes, and
Okay.
maybe it would be good just to have the list of those that
Yes,
qualified
that would be good.
so that we can follow it.
So in this second round, I would encourage an exchange and a discussion. If anyone would like to start, but I think we should pause and discuss each candidate a little bit as this becomes more close, right? So we are submitting to a vote. Mr. Hupiak, I want to ask each and every person who would like to make a comment in favor or against Mr. Hupiak to do so at this point.
Так.
I'm not,
Ні,
we're not,
коментарів немає.
no comment? Okay. I think, Andre, that goes to you alphabetically. Would you like to make a comment?
Ну, скажімо так, оскільки
Well, I'll say that. I vote against, and I will continue to. That pushes me slightly in the other direction from the positive selection. But
я можу сказати одне спостереження.
one observation I have.
Під час співбесіди я поставив
During the interview, I asked the candidate
конкретне і просте питання
a very specific and a very simple question.
в якості,
How he sees declarants
в якості
as objects, as clients of the system of declaration, or as partners.
ти точно розумієш, з ким
I
ти маєш
think
справу,
if you understand who you're dealing with, you will immediately understand what you want to say. It took the candidate about 2 minutes
лише вихід на цю відповідь.
just to start,
Не була однозначна.
and ultimately we did not get
Для мене дуже важливо
a finalized answer.
був у партнерських стосунках із декларантами, щоб він розумів водночас, що держава не лише контролює їх, вона надає їм сервіс.
Розуміє, хто це, бо
It's
це
important
надання
that the person
послуг.
understands that
Це був
the
один
state
із
not
моїх
only
мотивів.
controls,
Я
but
думаю,
provides the
що тут
service to the declarant. For me,
достатньо
it's
того,
enough.
що я
If we go
хотів
to the
сказати.
next
Якщо ми
round of
перейдемо далі,
voting,
то я зможу ще
we
щось
can
додати.
talk
Але ось так,
more.
щоб розуміти, щоб
But
лишатися позитивним, я кажу про те, що я I'm saying what I was expecting and why I did not see
I'm just
my
saying what I was waiting
expectations
for
met.
and why
We
my
are
expectation
being studied
didn't
as well.
work.
Maybe
Maybe
next time we will hear
they
from
will
the
be telling us
candidates
exactly what we
what we
wanted
want to say, but
hear,
well,
but
those
the
are my
argument is the
arguments.
argument.
Так.
І коментарі.
Коментарі ви
Да,
хочете?
якщо
No, let me.
Ні, в
You
мене
want the
нема.
comments? You want no? I don't have comments.
Yes, you should vote. You voted yes. Andre voted no with commentary.
No, nay.
You can vote however you wish, and then if you want, you can make commentary. So we do it at the same time. Just, that was my mistake, not to be clear on that. Okay, so please, your
Да.
vote.
Нам треба комент,
And vote
Yes.
and comment if,
комент о voice.
both.
Да, my voice. Я проголосувала, так.
I voted yes.
мені здається, що
I
перше
think
голосування був таким
that
орієнтаційним, щоб ми звірили
the first tour of voting was orientational for us to understand what we stand on. And I would like to explain for the committee members and for those who are watching us and for the candidates that the votes of the Ukrainian part of the committee are important as to the votes of the committee members nominated by the donors. They are able to do a bit more just to make the candidate pass. This candidate has to get 3 votes. That's why in the first round you can vote for one person and then change your position. Then I remind you that each vote of the committee member nominated by the Cabinet of Ministers can be decisive because we vote in the alphabetic order, and I want everyone to understand this. So I was more cautious about who I voted for in the first round. Now we have to narrow the circle and we have to go to the results, and taking into account that till the candidates who go to the next round are the candidates who get the majority from the committee members appointed by the international donors, I think that I will refuse for the favor of Pavlushik, so my vote is no.
Thank you very much. I'm also voting against Mr. Hupiak because, as I said, I consider the legal background and the performance in the legal test quite important. And I'm being consistent, I think, in this. And also, I think there's not enough experience in the areas that are directly connected with the work of an ACP. Therefore, I vote against.
And I am also going to keep my no vote on two grounds. One is basic limited experience. I think the position of head of the NACP, and I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Hubiak and his work. And I think he's an outstanding professional. And I thought that of many candidates, but in essence, I'm looking for a level of experience that I don't believe he has and would be able to carry into this very, very high level, high pressure job, which will require someone to stand very tall in not only in Ukraine, but internationally. And I wish him every luck in his career, but I'm going to stick with my no vote. Very good. So that we now turn to the next vote is for Dmytro Kalmykov.
Ні.
No.
Yes. Так.
Ні.
Like to
No.
Yes. I'll give a short comment if nobody minds. Розмова з паном Калмиковим.
So, the interview with Mr. Kalmykov was the case where, from some narrow professional discussion, was giving me certain intellectual pleasure. I have counted generally from all the list, there were only a few of such candidates. Sometimes my brain cells were happily excited because we were discussing how to improve certain procedure. There were not so many candidates like this. I don't know why, but let me tell you, maybe 3 or 4 people like this. And as to Mr. Kalmykov, we could clearly see that he was at the roots of the reboot of the agency. And despite the ever-changing climate in the agency, he managed to stay there and to try to do his maximum. What he was able to do at his position, he has great knowledge. What is very important for me, he doesn't get stuck on what they created. He doesn't see this system as something rigid. He really tries to improve this institution, and I think it would be a good choice out of the number of people who already work in an ACP. As to other people from an ACP who take part in this competition, well, Kalmykov, how he is different from them. He is more practical. He has more experience of work in the field, so to say. And the fact here that he already tried to implement some reforms is very impressive. Some reforms were successful, some not, but he knows what is to win and how to fail. And nevertheless, he is carrying on. He is trying to change this institution. And no matter what the result of this voting ultimately is, I hope Mr. Kalmykov will continue his efforts. And whether he becomes the head or another person is appointed as a head, I hope he will have another victories in reforming an ACP.
Мікрофончик.
Калмиков. Я вже Калмиков голосуємо. Ні.
No.
Я хочу трохи пояснити.
I would like to explain. As I mentioned, based on all the information we received, I mean the documents, monitoring, in my opinion, NACP needs a reboot, and external leader can make NACP closer to this desired reboot and to change and improve the approaches. I believe in it. I don't want to say that those candidates who came from NACP, who are actively working in ACP right now, they are unprofessional. No, they are professionals for sure, but my position is like this. That's why I vote against Mr. Kalmykov.
I'm voting for Mr. Kalmykov because I think he was, and I should take a step back and say again, working on the commission that did the audit of the NACP, I had numerous discussions with the staff of NACP, the higher management, the middle management. Mr. Kalmykov was in the middle of all important processes in the area of policy design and prevention. And I think what I liked about him was also his capacity of talking about, let's not call them failures, but maybe non-achievements or imperfect products. I've been told of many instances where he was able to withstand pressure and where he was able to manage crises. So I think for me, these are elements that point me in the direction of supporting him to become the next head of the NACP. But I do hope that in the case this doesn't happen, he remains in NACP, because I think what we've seen in these interviews in the last months, as we were conducting this process, is a lot of talent. So I do hope that people are watching and that we can make use of this talent somehow for the benefit of the NACP.
So let me explain why I'm staying with my yes vote for Mr. Kalmykov. First of all, I was extremely impressed with his presentation during the interview. He spoke in full paragraphs. He was very logical and orderly and detailed in the way he presented very complex issues, and it clearly has highly proficient communication skills and analytical skills to complement that. He's also to Commissioner Onyshenko's point, he bridges theory and practice. He's a real serious scholar himself, prolific actually, and I feel that's important because it represents an interest and demonstrates a capacity for continual learning, which you will need in this in this role. And so to sort of respond to, yes, he's coming from within the organization, I understand that, but I also think his ability to step outside of it is very clear. And he really did have a plan for almost everything we threw at him. I was really impressed with the level at which he had sort of planned out his, the next steps in this, in the growth of the NAC and the growth of the NACP. So I am going to stick with my yes vote for him. So, commissioners, we're now please vote on the approval of Katerina Kapliuk as the head of the NACP.
Ні.
No.
Ні. Nay.
No.
Що стосується коментаря,
As to my comment,
я можу сказати наступне.
I can say the following.
Катерина Каплюк була
Miss Katerina Kapluk was
співбесіда, з якою
one of the candidates
була необхідно для
whose interview
цієї комісії інтелектуального
gave
насолоду.
an intellectual pleasure to the committee members because it was obvious that this person is not just interested in in the job she's doing, but she's really passionate about it. It's a part of her life. She doesn't stop in her research. She's trying to encompass and to go deeply into different areas which are sometimes new for an ACP, and sometimes she's a pioneer and innovator. It's obvious that she continues to do the similar job even after leaving an ACP, but at the same time, I have to say that, well, I compare it with my own experience. The task force is a good experience when you need to cooperate with a lot of people in task force, interact with a lot of people, but it's a kind of different experience than managing a routine work of a big number of people. And according to my observation, people are more gentle with each other in task force because they know that their work is temporary. They are more cautious, they are more tolerant. You will never face such opposition or reactions from the colleagues. And sometimes this is what sometimes happens in a big team. That's why we have to say that at the moment there is some lack of experience. And I think if Katerina is going to develop, she can get more of managerial experience. We are happy to see that this candidate is already on this path. She's willing to develop. She's willing to develop in terms of communicational skills, and she admits that she's working on it actively. And I think if this candidate will not choose the career of independent expert, I think by work, by self-improvement, this candidate will be able to win at some other competition later in time, but not yet.
Від мене також.
Вибачте. Ні, і я хочу прокоментувати.
No, and I would like to comment briefly, I was also impressed by Ms. Katerina, her education, her experience as a journalist, a lot of desire to bring in the changes and some kind of sharpness. I think it's due to the age, due to the youth. You cannot buy experience, you can only gain experience. And I think that we will see Ms. Katerina in some serious institution as a head of the institution, and she will not only be the effective manager, but a person who will show that gender policy is something that really works. But with time, for now, no, unfortunately. When I have to repeat again that my approach to voting is very thorough, and I aim to narrow the circle of the candidates in order to give the possibility to move forward. I think that Ms. Katerina, of course, is a highly qualified candidate. Her knowledge in NACP and her ideas are very interesting, and I feel sorry that she left NACP because I think she could be in an ACP team again, but still I would say no.
I'm also keeping my no for Ms. Kapliuk. I think she had excellent scores in the various tests that she took. But I feel the managerial skills and the managerial experience so far is still not enough for the head of such a big agency.
Thank you. First, my commentary. I want to start by saying, as I went through this process, I did give a lot of weight with respect to each candidate to their strategic vision statement. I spent a lot of time with that. I also spent a lot of time with their motivation letters to kind of understand how unique their voice is in this world. And then when we got to this phase of the interviews, it was a pleasure to be able to ask them about their vision in more detail. And so she had an extraordinary strategic vision statement and showed a facility with language, with many issues. Her energy is very positive, very high. She runs fast, and Ukraine is running fast. And Ukraine is a young nation in some ways. And Ukraine would benefit greatly from having someone like Ms. Kapliuk in a leadership position. She was the only candidate in the interview stage who actually took the tension between the preventive and the punitive and turned it into a program. And when she said, well, in year one, it's going to be the year of restoring justice. She's going to focus on the punishment and get that all cleaned up and get the declarations cleaned up and digitize the declarations. It was great. And then she said, in the next 3 years, I'm going to turn to prevention. And that's a very smart management solution. And then I'll just end by saying I understand that she does have limited management experience, and would be, you know, in a challenging position. I think that's probably more than matched by the other skills she has, including in particular her empathy. She emphasized empathy as a leadership skill, and a lot of people do that, right? But she has empathy. You can tell that she has empathy for others. So having said all that, nevertheless, we need to narrow the pool of candidates, as my deputy chair has just philosophically reminded us. And so I'm going to, at this stage of the voting, vote no on Ms. Kapliuk. Dear commissioners, we are now going to vote on Victor Pavlushik as the next head of the NACP.
Так.
Yes. Yes. I have a comment. Well, I understand from the votes that we had before, probably this candidate does not have to be promoted for those who voted for him. Yet, those who did not vote for them, I can say this. I can say again, he led in the competition around intellect. He showed high level of reliability in psychological tests, and what's more important, we did not see anything in his history that could tell us that he has ever abused his power, his authority, on any kind of reason. And I think when we analyze the interviews, I would not say that public speaking is the strong side of this candidate, but I think from what I read in the texts, maybe sometimes I do not like the style. This is something which can be worked, same as public speaking skills, but his synthesis of and analysis of information, first synthesis, then analysis, is of very high level. This skill is. And for me, it's a sign that his intellectual capability is very much higher than that of an average person. And with such set of qualities that he has, and with the experience that he has, he can make a good effort to make sure that in future, very quickly, he could pick up on everything that exists in an ACP, which I see that he understands and can go deeper and better when he has to be more knowledgeable of that, but he will also be able to work with the public, which could be a challenge for him. Sometimes you can feel it, but I believe that he has the skills that are needed, and he will be able to add that one as well, and ultimately be an accomplished civil servant, an accomplished statesman. This is a bit of a risk on our side, but we believe in this candidate because of the qualities that we could see during the competition and his professional life before that.
Так, і комент, якщо дозволите.
Yes, and a comment, if I may.
Мені сподобалось в ньому безумовно.
Of course, there are many things that I liked in him. He is a strong professional,
Більше практики.
and I would say that
Втім, в нього хороше стратегічне.
he is a good specialist. He has good strategic vision,
І ще одне,
monitoring,
що ви пам'ятаєте,
analytics, and one more quality, if you remember,
запитували, і він
when we asked him about something and he didn't quite know about that, he was thinking, he would say, I can't know everything, I'm no Wikipedia. And I liked that because there were candidates who, even when they did not know, tried to show that we didn't know, none of us, but they did. He's not afraid of saying that he needs something. He needs to improve, which is good. He is a progressive candidate, and I vote for him.
Так.
Yes.
В сенсі так, я голосую за Павло.
I mean, I say yes.
Це перше. І
That's the first thing.
прокоментувати.
And I have a comment.
Ну, по-перше, ми
First of all,
зараз ми якраз
now
в позиції,
we are exactly
яка може
in the position
для
that could be
української
weak
сторони. І я хочу це
for the Ukrainian side.
іноземної
I would like to highlight that for the international part of the team,
тому що
because
ну, по-перше, якщо зараз
if now,
якщо зараз
if now
хтось із членів
someone
команди
from the international part
я не погрожую, я просто хочу
of the Commission, I'm not threatening, I just explain. If someone from the international part of our team votes no on Pavlushchik, I understand that he will not make it to the next round because we have a candidate who received 3 votes for 3 yeses from the international part. I just want to know the procedure. Who makes it into the 3rd round?
Давайте почнемо.
Є ж один голос від мене вже. Він проходить.
But he has 1 vote from me.
В третій тур він
He will make it to the 3rd round.
Nobody gets the qualified majority. To the next round, we have the candidate that have the highest number of votes from the donor-nominated commission members.
Yes, and we have Kalmykov, who gets 3 votes from international donors, and it
Mhm.
means that
The highest number of votes, yes, correct.
yes, we can lost Pavlushchik on this stage.
It's possible.
Так, це можливо. І тоді
Yes, it is possible. And then we may have the situation when we're blocked. We were prepared to that we talked about this, that we all need to be prepared for that we can block the procedure. I don't know how that continues, but I want to highlight that. Now about the candidate, Pavlushchik, I think that this is the best combination of the qualities that I was talking when I was explaining my criteria for selection. The first, it was very helpful to hear the interviews from the previous stages. And I think that we could clarify a lot. There were no doubts on his integrity. Based on that, I don't see risks that could exist in terms of integrity here. This candidate is clear to me and to the society. Like Andriy said, he scored the highest on strategic vision when all of the scores are taken together. He also showed good results on the general skills test. Again, one of the highest, I think he was. His legal case is good. Oh, there were 3 people who scored the same on this legal case. He's 2/4. So his strategic vision was the best. His legal case was good. His ethical case, the case on ethical leadership, was equally good. So it seems to me, if we take all of the criteria, he's the best candidate. Then I added more from the interviews that we had. I agree that there were stronger public speakers, but still he held himself well. He answered the questions, he was honest. All that taken together with the things I mentioned above, I think makes it possible for us to vote for him. So I say yes.
I also say yes, and I don't know what else to add
Yep.
because there has been a lot said on Mr. Pavluchik. Maybe just to say that I have a different view on his speaking style. I think he speaks quite well, and he tries to come across as someone that has this challenge. Just as some people present themselves as being perfectionist, and they present that as a fault. But now moving to more serious reasons. Mr. Pavluchik has experience, long-term experience in managerial positions, but also in handling very difficult cases, very, very difficult cases where there was a lot of pressure. And there was a lot of crisis management going on. I invited him with some questions to tell us more about it. I like the fact that he did not pose as a victim, but I think everybody that has followed the investigations of NABU can relate to the questions that I asked and know exactly what was at stake there. I think these qualities are important for the next head of an ACP, because they have difficult tasks ahead, the control of the declarations, but also control of financing of political parties, again, in very complicated times. So that's why I'm in favor of Mr. Pavluchik, and I do hope that by joining the NACP, he would manage to adjust to a new mindset, because I think this is his biggest challenge, to become from an investigator, someone that can wear a different hat, really run this agency, and also understand the importance of prevention and of policy design. I think he told us a little bit about that, but maybe that is his most important area for future development.
Thank you, Commissioner Stefan. So one of the responsibilities of being the chair of this wonderful commission is to make sure that we all get the opportunity to express our views, including our preferred candidates, our ideal candidates. And this procedure that we adopted allowed us to do that today. We were, just to reiterate, that in the first round, we were able to vote for as many candidates as we thought we would like to see in this position. Having said that, we also wanted to assure that there was a debate and a discussion and an exchange and a learning process. And so I too saw Mr. Pawluszyk's strategic vision statement, his motivation letter, his scores as really being consistently brilliant. And there's no doubt about that. And I was very duly impressed by that. He's also a person of great character and integrity. And so I think he represents the possibilities of learning and of change. And so because of where we now are and because of where we're evaluating the state of this discussion in this second round of voting, I'm going to switch my vote to being in favor of Viktor Pawluszczyk as the head of the NACP. Commissioners, please vote on approval of Alexander Skamarov as head of the NACP.
Ні.
No.
Ні.
No.
І, мабуть,
And probably
на цьому етапі можна
at this stage,
те, що
the reason
представників
is that out of the two representatives of NABU, Mr. Pawluszczyk
падіння необхідних
had a better combination
навичок
of the skills and qualities in one person than Mr.
Я би на цьому, мабуть,
There were other people than Mr. Skomarov, and I think here I will stop.
Ні.
No.
Я б хотіла сказати кілька слів про пана Олександра.
I would say a couple of words about Alexander. I think that from the point of view of interviews today, he came across better than we saw that in integrity interviews, but still, I mean, when we were selecting the top 10, I really voted for because he had some good ratings, good tests, but Skomarov and Pawluszczyk are from the same institution. Also, to me, it seems that I had to narrow down my choices. I also preferred Pawluszczyk over Skomarov.
Yeah, for similar reasons, I vote against Mr. Skomarov, but I want to say that this last interview was indeed very good, I thought. Much better than the previous interview, if I may say so. And also, I think I somehow balanced candidates from an ACP among themselves, among each other, candidates from NABU also among each other. And I thought Mr. Pawluszczyk has a better chance of becoming and really running becoming the head and really running the NACP.
So I'm going to stay with my yes vote on behalf of Mr. Skamarov, and let me explain why. even though it doesn't appear possible that I will convince any of my fellow commissioners at this stage. But I do want to say the following. First of all, I thought his interview was superior today, and it wasn't an accident. He came under a lot of different types of questions, and he showed to me that he can think in linear and nonlinear ways. He showed to me that he would project to the outside world, including the EU and other international stakeholders, a very, very, very powerful image of the success of Ukraine in fighting corruption, right? It's very important at this time, especially at this time in history, for Ukraine to be able to tell its story in a way that is factual, accurate, precise, of fighting corruption and Russia at the same time. And I could see him doing that. I could see him doing it very well. And I think he's a natural in many ways as a possible leader in the future of Ukraine's anti-corruption efforts. He also had a very good strategic vision statement according to my criteria. He humbly admitted that charisma was a requirement of this position going forward, and that he wasn't sure he had it, but nevertheless, you could see that he has a certain authenticity and a certain charm, and could find common language with many different stakeholders. So he also had a plan. Let me be very clear. He had a very specific vision of what he would do when he came to NACP from NABU, and how he would build in room to build out the preventive function. And finally, I'll just say he's withstood pressure in his job. He mentioned it. When NABU was initially created, it came under intense pressure from then existing government forces. And he described it in a way that convinced me that he lived through it and managed it and stayed independent. So I'm going to stick with my yes vote, even though it doesn't appear possible to convince others to change their minds. Dear colleagues, it looks as though we have one more vote, and this is, please vote in favor of Alexander Starodubtsev to be the next head of the NACP.
Ні, не, але кандидат
No, but
комунікації з нами продемонстрував,
Starodubtsev and his communication with us demonstrated an obvious ability to acknowledge his mistakes.
він визнав якусь велику помилку, але
I can't say that he made a big acknowledgement of some great mistake, but unfortunately for our culture is not very typical. But we know that learning from mistakes is the best way to self-perfection. But Alexander is the type of the visionary for NACP. The approach to main direction of corruption prevention,
можливо, час якого ще не настав.
whose time didn't come yet. I hope he will not be person out of time. I hope he will feel the moment when the efforts of financial control will be enough to move to awareness raising. I wouldn't say like imposing the atmosphere, but cultivating the atmosphere of integrity in the society and implementation without any stick but only with a carrot, the idea that integral behavior is more advantageous, more interesting, more beneficial in terms of perspectives of self-development, and then integrity opens more doors than you can have now. I really like this approach. I understand that sometimes candidate was not as perfect during his legal case presentation, but I understand this. Despite working in the apparatus, I understand that he had other directions of work, and if he's able to admit one mistake, he would be able to admit other mistakes and improve. And I think when he will take part in other future competitions, he will have more understanding of how important it is to be open. Partially, he has demonstrated this in communication with us. We are very grateful to him and for all his endeavors during several works of working in the agency. We hope that he will carry on with his efforts. I hope the importance of his area of work will be understood. Maybe it's not in the priority right now, but this area of work should be further developed, and I think it will be fruitful not per se, but as a supportive area that creates the necessary environment.
Ні, і я хочу також комент. Я поясню.
No, and I would like to comment. Let me explain why Mr. Alexander Starodubtsev is a strategist of an ACP, but he is the leader of the future. It happens he's a little bit ahead of his time, and if we didn't have the situation in Ukraine as we have now, I think it would be a great leader. And I think he has a lot of great things to do in the future. I'm very grateful for his humanistic position. It's very important, and he is one of the developers of anti-corruption policy in Ukraine. I think he's just a bit ahead of his time. At the time of peace building, I think we will hear about him, and we will hear a lot of great things about him. I would like to say about Alexander that I would like to have a teacher like this in university or to go to one of his trainings, because like his erudition is probably the greatest out of all the candidates we have seen in this competition. Also, regarding the test results, the integrity test, he has the highest results. It means his moral compass is one of the strongest among our candidates. And what is very important it is very important generally for the work in an ACP. But as I mentioned, in my opinion, an ACP needs a reboot and fresh blood. That's why I hope Alexander will stay in the team and will be able to implement in the new team those brilliant ideas regarding prevention, regarding ethical compasses that should be brought up to the new level, not only among public officials, but in our society in general. He was speaking about important and deep things. The results of this, I hope we will be able to observe in the nearest future.
As I've explained, I looked at candidates coming from the same
Як
institution in
я
a
казала,
somewhat comparative manner.
що я намагалася порівнювати кандидатів, які походять з однієї інституції. Мені було дуже приємно вчути вчора пана Стародубцева. Це амбіційний кандидат. Коли його слухаєш, дізнаєшся дійсно багато цікавого. Хочу ще раз сказати, що
to these candidates. And I hope they can all come together in this big anti-corruption puzzle in Ukraine. Thank you.
So thank you, colleagues. And I just a brief comment, and then I'll vote. This candidate was one of the only ones who really understood the organic nature of building a new institution intuitively. He expressed it well. He explained it well. In a very crucial way, that's what the NACP faces as its biggest challenge, which is how do you grow an institution from being an adolescent to being a fully mature and sustainable institution. And he understood that that has to be done based on shared values. He understood that it was essential to point the way towards integrity, achieving integrity in every corner of government, in every corner of society. He has a vision of Ukraine with a new standard of integrity that is uniquely Ukrainian. And so while I understand your hesitations, and this is certainly you're in much better place to judge, I do think that he does point the way decisively towards the future for Ukraine. And I hope that his mission of bringing in educational institutions as a key driver of building integrity is met, including at your universities, right? And at the universities that we all know are such great universities in Ukraine. So, but with all that in mind, seeing the way the voting is going, I will withdraw my yes vote and vote no for Mr. Starodubtsev. And so I'm going to turn to Commissioner Stefan to tell us where we are.
So we have a winner. We have a winner. Mr. Pavlushchik has all our votes, and I think it is very fortunate to have a unanimous decision. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you all commissioners. Thank you, dear commissioners. This has been a very intensive and interesting couple of days. And let me just stop here and say, before we go to the next steps, thank you, fellow commissioners. Thank you, Secretariat. Thank you very much, translators, especially from my point of view. You've been brilliant, consistent, patient, and tireless over the past several days. So thank you all. And we want, of course, to congratulate Viktor Pavlushchik on this honor. We will be going through the procedural steps in the next 24 hours to send our recommendation to the Cabinet of Ministers. And we will want to give you all the support that we can as commissioners and as representatives of different parts of Ukrainian civil society going forward. Mr. Pavlushchik, we have some friendly advice for you. And it's not that you should take a class on public speaking, because I think you'll figure that one out. I think the advice is continue to do what you've already shown that you are capable of doing, which is both to learn from others, to listen to others, and to unlearn what you know that may not be helpful. Continue to actively listen, which means letting all the stakeholders within NACP and outside of NACP articulate their points of view before you form an opinion, because people are smart and they will know if you've already made up your mind. So don't put yourself in a position where you project outwards that you've got the answer when in fact you need collective leadership and you need organic growth of this institution to be successful. I think let me just transition here to a word to civil society. One of the most important learnings I've had at this point is that while this position is undoubtedly highly important, Ukraine's in an important transition from being a country where institutions are personality-based to being institutions that are based on people, processes, values, and vision. And so to civil society and to those who are most actively involved, this person will need your collective support. This institution will need you to step in and help with constructive recommendations, with good advice, with ways of building trust, with ways of communicating the message, and working with all stakeholders in Ukrainian society on building a national accountability system and integrity system, because that's what the NACP stands for. To our other candidates, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, we hope that you stay at the NACP if you are there. We hope that you find, wherever you may be, new pathways to elevate your career, your performance. This is a very, very hard decision. And that includes all 10 candidates. I want you all to know that this was a very tough decision. Ukraine is indeed extremely fortunate to have such a high level of talent, intellect, theory, practice, passion, and I am confident that this institution, with the support of everybody, led by Viktor Pavlushik, will begin to generate global best practices. And so with all that in mind, thank you again. We are going to take a 30-minute break, and I believe we're going to go ahead and have a press conference later this evening. If I'm correct, that means at about 9:20. Is that correct? Okay, see you in 30 minutes. Are we all good? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start by saying that on February 14th, 2024, the Ukraine government issued a plan called Ukraine's Reforms Matrix. The first item on the list was that the National Agency for Corruption Prevention should, by virtue of following an open, competitive, and merit-based selection, create a new head of the agency, including through mandatory integrity checks. So I'm proud to say that as of February 24, we have accomplished this goal, and I'm happy to inform you that we have agreed on the candidate, Viktor Pavlushik. We voted on him as a unanimous vote. And Viktor has extraordinary skills and capabilities that we want to discuss with you for a moment. First of all, he's currently a senior detective at the National Agency at NABU. And he has, in that capacity, demonstrated that he is a man of courage, honesty, and integrity. And he is capable of resisting pressure from all sides. Secondly, he's a man of great courage. He's been fighting on the front line of anti-corruption most of his career. When Russia conducted the full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 22, in February 2022, Viktor remained in the Kiev region and joined the Consolidated Operational and Combat Detachment of the National Bureau, taking direct part in measures necessary to ensure the defense of Ukraine, protect the security of the population and the interests of the state in connection with the military aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine in the Bucha district. We all agreed as a commission. He was voted unanimously. I should say that this took place after very intense discussions and debate that included consideration of all the finalists. There were 9 other finalists in this final state of the competition, all of whom were uniquely qualified in different ways. And we want to just say for a moment, thank you to those individuals for submitting to this process, for bringing us your best skills and qualifications, and for showing the courage to raise your hand and volunteer to be considered for this position at this time. And we encourage all of you to continue to support the National Agency for Corruption Prevention in any way that you can. I also want to point out that Viktor demonstrated in the course of our competition a very high level of performance in all the tests that he took. His strategic vision was very clear. His motivational letter was very clear and compelling. And it started with the idea that his role as the head of the NACP is to continue to fight the fight of the revolution of dignity of Ukraine. And so he is an inspiring figure, and we wish him the very best in his new role. And we also want to say we hope that he will be given all the support from society, from NGOs, from expert groups, from other government agencies that he will need to bring this national agency to a new level. I also want to thank my fellow commissioners. This has been a wonderful journey. For me, it has been a tremendous learning opportunity. We have been together now for 4 months. We've worked together almost on a daily basis, sometimes online, most recently in person. We've gotten to know each other. We've had our discussions. We've had our disagreements. And we've always come back to a very friendly, respectful, and warm atmosphere. I also want to say on behalf of Laura and I as foreign commissioners, we never felt anything but completely welcome and accepted in your country. We know this is a very, very sensitive issue, and we certainly envision the day when this kind of decision will be made by Ukrainians for Ukrainians. Let me now, before we turn to questions, I'm going to ask Laura, Commissioner Stefan, to address some of the procedural issues that we pursued and the opportunities that we had to, I would say, create a very robust, competitive, transparent, and fair process with a lot of rigor. So please, Commissioner Stefan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I will quickly go through the process that brought us here with the winner at the end of this competition. We have received 64 applications, packages, and we have reviewed them all, checking whether they are complete and whether they comply with the requirements set by the law. We concluded that 51 candidates had complete files, and we proceeded to the first basic check of skills of the candidates, the general skills testing. And then all candidates who passed the 107 points threshold were admitted to the next stage of the selection process. That led to 24 candidates undergoing a thorough check of compliance with integrity and professional standards established by the law, and by the criteria and methodology of assessment that we have approved at the beginning of this process. We conducted an integrity check and at the same time a professional competence check. The integrity check involved information submitted by the candidates, information that we have received from NGOs and other third parties, data received from state registries and authorities, written requests for clarifications, and we had quite a number of written requests and responses from the candidates, requests to authorities and organizations to verify the information that was submitted to us, public integrity interviews with all the 24 candidates, and additional written requests to the candidates where we needed to clarify additional points. The professional competence check involved a psychological test and interview conducted by Psymetrics, a company, a reliability test conducted by the same company, a practical legal test developed by a legal professor, a practical ethical leadership test, which was developed by the Basel Institute and was assessed individually by all commission members, and a strategic vision of future of NACP questionnaire that was developed by the commission and assessed individually by the commission members. And then we also had a special vetting done by the government, and that generated a list of 10 candidates that were invited for the professional interviews. And based on the procedure that we conducted today and yesterday, you have seen at the end of it the voting procedure, which generated one candidate who become the winner of the competition. What I want to add in addition, because these are all very technical data, is that as opposed to other competition processes, this is not really a mathematical exercise. So we have numerous sources of information, some more important than others, some seen through the lens of each commissioner, and the weight may be different given to various elements that we have reviewed. And I think at the end of the day, in order to incorporate all the wealth of information that we have collected, not just through tests and information from the candidates, but also through interviews with stakeholders in Ukraine that have a deep knowledge and a long-term knowledge of the anti-corruption environment and of particular people that are working in this field. I think everything comes together. And the question posed to the Commission was, who's the best for this position? And I think we were lucky to have 10 candidates who did a very good job at presenting their professional perspective on where the NICB should go in the next years. For me, it was, a great joy to see that every one of them has reviewed the audit that was performed on the work of NICB and has internalized and, in a way, thought of the recommendations that were suggested by the auditors as providing a path for the development of the agency. And I think that's extremely, extremely important. So I want to thank everybody that has participated in this procedure, congratulate the winner, and hope that those that did not win will not feel disheartened, because this is not the point of such processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stefan. Let's go to questions from our audience.
Колеги, ваші запитання.
Dear colleagues, your questions, please.
Олександре, будь ласка.
Alexander, please.
Вітаю, колеги. Добрий вечір.
Dear colleagues, good evening. Let me congratulate you on finalizing this competition. I have to say on my behalf, that the committee set up the high level of transparency for this competition that has been just held. And I have only one question. I'm going to ask it to you right now. What is integrity check? How did it look like? What was measured? How can you comment on this? What it is different? Well, reliability check and integrity check.
Andre, please.
Андрію, будь ласка.
Поясню. Ми намагалися підготуватися до цього конкурсу набагато більш...
Let me explain. We was trying to prepare for this competition more thoroughly than to some other competitions. We had a question whether we want to measure this as a part of one big test of the psychological profile, or should we take it out and use it generally? A new test for trustworthiness. There is a test detector. It's a tool used by Symetrics, psychodiagnostical instrument of new generation, and it measures those personal qualities that gives person a possibility to stick to social, moral, and organizational norms and rules. It allows us to determine the people who have risks to go against certain values of the community. If we're talking about anti-corruptional community, it was very relevant to us. In the communities where there are no strong moral compass, maybe this test wouldn't be relevant. But I would like to say that while making this testing, we were measuring such things as whether a person is inclined to conflicts, and some conflicts that have no reasons, because generally conflict is something normal. It is a way to progress. But if it's just the essence of the person to have conflicts here and there, this is not very good. Like at the level of egoism, what is person able to put her own interests behind the common interests? Also, we were trying to measure the moral maturity, whether a person has a system of moral compasses and whether the person will follow them. As to the problems with discipline, possible problems with discipline, and the system of motivation due to which a person is able to do their job. All these 5 elements, we were able to research them, using this tool, and the candidate who became a winner was one of the best.
Дякую, пане Андрію. Нагадаю, що це
Thank you, Andriy. Let me remind you that it was a question from Alexander Kalitenko, Transparency International, Inna Ведерникова, Дзеркало тижня, Media. I am Inna Ведерникова from Дзеркало тижня Media. I'm sorry, I will have my camera off. I have a problem with it, so I will just only be using my voice within the first round. The four candidates didn't pass. Andrei Vishnevsky was one of them, the ex-deputy member of an ACP. According to my information, he gained very high scores in integrity and professionalism, but he received 6 no. Was it disconnected with the publications that appeared in the media on the eve of the interviews? I'm sure Mr. Vishnevsky and 3 other candidates who didn't make it to the second round, it is important for them to know the reasons of such choice, because all the other participants received substantial comments. This is my first question. Could you please reply?
Very good. Ina, thank you for raising that very important question. It occurred to me after the vote took place that we didn't have the opportunity to address the strengths of Mr. Vishnevsky as a candidate. And let me do that right now, because first of all, he made it to the final list of 10. There is no doubt that Mr. Vishnevsky has perhaps some of the deepest and broadest experience in fighting corruption in Ukraine. He has championed the cause of anti-corruption in the public sector, in government, and as an individual who lives and breathes this set of values. And so by not commenting that we by no means wanted to suggest that we didn't take his candidacy very seriously. We did, and I personally did. And when it came to the final vote, I think I can speak somewhat for the group by saying that we were looking for a new perspective and a person who could bring in a kind of new energy or freshness to this institution. In some ways, Mr. Vishnevsky is himself an institution fighting corruption in Ukraine, and I'm sure he will continue to be that for Ukraine. We want to encourage him and all other candidates to not to be discouraged or disheartened by the decision of this commission under these very special circumstances. I am sure it's not a reflection on anything about him personally, and I'm sure that he deserves support in any role that he pursues in Ukraine. Would anybody like to add anything?
Well, I would just like to say that we are all mature people and we are used to being pressured. We asked our competitors whether they can resist pressure. And I think there's no doubt in my head that this decision had nothing to do with whatever was published in the media, as unpleasant as it may have been, because I think you understand that it's not pleasant to see articles that already discuss about winners when you know that no decision has been taken on the winners of this procedure. And I think if you look at the way in which we vote, you see that that article bears no significance for us, because the article was talking about 2 candidates, right? Personally, I looked at the candidates coming from NACP and I compared them to each other. And my preference went to Mr. Kalmykov, but that doesn't mean that the other candidates that are or were in an ACP don't have qualities. And I think Matthew made an excellent effort to explain that. to the public. And I think the interviews that you have seen speak for themselves, right? So there's a enormous amount of knowledge, and it was quite illuminating for us to have these discussions with the candidates. But to come back to your question, no, and we cannot be pressured by articles that say we have decided when we know that we haven't.
Your second question, Nina.
Пан Дмитро Калмиков, основний
Mr. Dmytro Kalmykov was the main competitor of the winner. He just wrote a post on Facebook where he says that he's leaving NACP. How unexpected this decision is for you? Do you think it's the right decision, and what does it tell you about?
So this is obviously his choice and his decision, and we can only respect and honor it. We do hope that this means that he has other pathways and opportunities and journeys in mind as he proceeds. He was an extremely competitive candidate for this position, and this only underscores really how very, very difficult it was to choose among this extraordinary array of talent. And this is not just words. These are formidable humans, formidable anti-corruption activists, and I'm sure Mr. Kalmykov will find a niche working on behalf of Ukraine. As I mentioned in the final voting session, I found his. This is a man with a plan. He has a very, very detailed grasp of what it means to fight systemic corruption in Ukraine from a systemic vantage point.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Дякую, пані Інно.
May
Колеги, ще запитання.
May I, please,
Так,
Oksana?
звісно.
Thank you, Ms. Inna. Other comments?
I want to say that I hope he reconsiders. Of course, we all respect his choices. I mean, if they are his choices, not ours. I hope he reconsiders. And I hope you can all see, not just from the articles, but also from the Facebook posts and from our discussions here, that everybody that has anything to do with anti-corruption is very passionate about this. And sometimes you can jump to decisions. But yes, whatever he decides to do, we respect it. I just think it would be a pity to resign just for this.
Next question.
Дякуємо, пані Лоро.
Дякую.
Наступне запитання.
Thank you, Laura.
Чи є ще запитання, колеги?
Do we have more questions?
Я можу ще одне задати.
I have one more.
Мабуть, таке дуже...
Okay, maybe this is a very short question. What was the most difficult for each one of you? Maybe you can suggest one sentence, how you define the biggest burden that you felt, because this is a lot of work professionally and emotionally.
Very good question. Let me turn to the deputy chair to start the bidding.
Але хочеться зробити в алфавітному порядку.
You are going to go in alphabetical order, right?
Вже так звикли в алфавітному.
We're used to it. Go in alphabetical order. I will speak for myself. The most difficult probably was to come to the understanding of the responsibility for the fact that our decision, unanimous decision of the majority, what we decide, who we select, that will mean a lot for our country. Much will depend on it. It is an important thing, fighting corruption, because our future depends very much on it. And it was hard to understand that responsibility. Yet in general, we are satisfied.
Дякую. Ще хтось скаже?
Thank you. Will somebody else join in? Apart from the obvious worry as to how good our choice will be and what positive effects it will bring about in the country, that meant it was difficult. Members of the Commission always find it difficult to expect when other members of the Commission will start revealing their ideas as to what they have heard, and you want to see whether you think alike or not. And to that moment when you are waiting for arguments to come and seeing whether it's agreement or disagreement. And when it's agreement in the competition procedure, and you don't feel repulsed by that in any way, morally, physically, intellectually, I am happy about that when we have it. I will tell you honestly that this process was not easy to agree, although we had signs of that being possible, or even not being possible, which was scary at times that we would not agree, but we managed to agree. And I really hope that our choice was good and we will see fruit from that. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, alphabetical order, right? I will step in. I had two difficult moments. The first was in the very beginning because we were getting to know each other. We were starting to understand each other step by step. We were getting deeper into the topic. We were not just working together. It was difficult working. We were ready for that, but we have to thank Matthew for this because he brought us all together. He made us a team. The first thing we asked him today, after we finished the voting, we asked, Matthew, what are we going to do tomorrow? We can't even imagine after this first month. What are we going to do without Matthew? Next, we had a team, a good team which made this competition transparent, accessible, public, and open. Second thing, which was surprisingly difficult for me personally, when we saw how many strong, professional, involved in what they're doing candidates we had to evaluate them. When you have to choose between average and the best, it's easy. But when you have to choose from many who are very good, it's always very difficult. It's almost surgically difficult. I think we did it. We are satisfied with our choice, with how dignified we were in the process, with our discussions. I think we did what we wanted to achieve from the very beginning. Thank you. Yes. For me, what was difficult was to begin the process and be engaged. I did not know what to expect from that. This was my first experience in such a commission. And the choice of the tasks and tests which we would like to have our candidates go through, that was difficult. You have to think very well as to what you are suggesting, how that will be taken, whether that will be helpful to select the best, or maybe we do not have to test for certain things. Next, for me personally, it was very difficult to deal with the integrity issues, to go through that, because it's my first time doing that. I have to evaluate students in my life. I don't evaluate finances of other people or whether they are ethical or unethical. This is not my thing. I'm very grateful to our analysts, to the secretariat, other members of the commission who were more experienced and helped me to get through these moments. It was difficult for me, but at the same time, I want to say again what I said today already. I was personally impressed by honesty of everyone and the help provided by everyone, despite the fact that sometimes we had different opinions. Still, we understood we have to go on and we have to get to the results, and it is desirable that we do get the results and we're satisfied with it. Because that was a moment when I thought, what would happen if we fail to select the head today? And there is the second iteration of the competition. Yes, I realized it today. And that was difficult. That was a difficult realization. That may not be the end. Okay, come on, we're not that much tired of each other to not to go into the second iteration for the sake of the country. But yeah, we managed. It's a compliment. Yes, I'm talking here about the time and effort. Trust me, we all invested a lot and we're grateful. I'm grateful to every member of the commission. You cannot even imagine how much time we had together, how many closed sessions we had, how much time we spent alone to study it all. That was impressive. Thank you.
I think for me, the most difficult thing was to fight the legacy of other procedures that weren't so successful. Procedures that got blocked, procedures that got delayed. And to hear it from almost everybody you talk with, because I told you we had a lot of interviews with stakeholders. What if? And yeah, I mean, this is a risk, especially since we did not know each other to begin with. But I think being aware of that risk, we incorporated it in our working procedures. And I think, now we can say we told you so. We told you we're going to come to a decision. But it's not a given. And I think it took a lot of maturity from all of us to arrive to this decision today, not in 2 months and not in 1 year. So I'm very happy we made it, but it was not an easy task. And I think we do set a standard for other procedures.
Thank you. So thank you for this question. It really is a wonderful question. It gives us each time to reflect. For me, the most difficult challenge in this process is the following. Knowing what I know, seeing what I see, and feeling what I feel whenever I work with the extraordinarily resilient people of Ukraine in the fight for good governance, the rule of law, and against corruption, and knowing how much passion and will and commitment that they have to do this in the midst of a war, to be living and hearing in the Western context all this doubt and questioning about Ukraine's ability to become a sovereign and sustainable nation. And so it's worth reiterating what I said at the top of this press conference, because to the extent the West is paying attention, they need to know this. This is just one example of how Ukraine remains unconquered in terms of its territory, but also continues to perform proficiently in anti-corruption. And again, I'll reiterate, on February 14th, 2024, the government of Ukraine issued its Ukraine Reforms Matrix. The first item on the list was to ensure an open, competitive, and merit-based selection for the new head of the National Agency for Corruption Prevention. And as of February 25th, today, we've accomplished that. I should say, Ukraine has accomplished that because this was a very multi-stakeholder effort from the beginning. And it was designed by many people working at the very beginning. It represented a lot of painful lessons learned, as Commissioner Stefan referenced. And it showed an ability to improve a very delicate set of procedures. So that was the most difficult for me, to know that this message is not getting through to, and the narrative is not being understood in the West properly. Having said that, we now have a new leader, Mr. Viktor Pavlushek, right? And we urge him to become a beacon of honesty in the way he projects outward the great story of Ukraine fighting corruption. And we urge him to pursue this as a conversation, as he did with us, being willing to admit mistakes, but being very specific about the nature of the progress that's being made. That's what we need to do. That's what Ukraine will need to do going forward to educate the West about how truly heroic and successful they're being. And we believe we've chosen the right candidate for those purposes.
Дякую усім. Олександре,
Thank
чи у вас
you. Alexander, do you have one more clarification question or what?
Так, якщо можна, я бачу.
Yes, if I may. I see that Ina was asking one more question, so I will come up with one more as well, if I may. Yes, go ahead. The winner of the competition is an external candidate, an outside, not from NACP. How he will manage, how he will be seen in this position, it remains to see. But now he, as the winner, is facing a big challenge, a lot of tasks to reform, to develop this institution, and following the recommendations of the International Independent Audit. So my question is this: does the Commission, or would the Commission, support the presentation of the results of the audit and recommendations of this external independent audit for the new winner? How the Commission could comment on that? Do we need to advocate such a presentation of the results of this audit for the new head?
I'm going to defer to Commissioner Stefan, who's very intimately familiar with that audit and the process.
And I will start with a full disclosure of my conflict of interest because I was part of the audit commission. So I think my answer to this question is quite predictable. I think it is very important to have a conversation, an in-depth conversation on the findings of the audit, because I think they offer good guidance as to what needs to be improved, and also puts a priority sign as to what are the crucial areas for immediate attention and which are the ones that can be put on the maybe second row of urgencies. So I'm all in favor, and I would like to offer my availability. I think this is very important, and I'm sure the team of NACP has also looked at it. For sure, the candidates that we have interviewed have all read the audit and had very interesting remarks to make about the findings.
Дякую, пані Лоро, і дякую, пану Олександру.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Alexander. Ina, you have one more question. I can see your hand raised. Well, I should have taken it down, but still I have a little question. Could you please say if we are going to have all of these tables with the scores of the candidates during the procedure published.
Дякую.
Thank you.
So I would like to reiterate what I said earlier. This is not a mathematical exercise. We have published the products of the candidates. We can all read them. We can have our own opinion about them. We have indicated in our conversation elements that may not be fully known to the public. And we have also indicated that as important as they may be, these scores are just one element to be taken into account when a decision is being made. For me personally, the interaction with stakeholders that are aware of the performance of the institution and how people inside the institutions handle their task was equally important. And I can't give a score to that, right? So each of us had various elements to take into account. And I think the procedure prescribed by the law allows us some flexibility in the way we evaluate people. And personally, if I may, a word of advice, I would advise against mathematical calculations only as the determinant element for making such decisions. I think you need to also sense the persons that are before you, to look into their eyes and understand, as some of my colleagues have said, whether they're lying to you or whether they're honest, whether they can say, I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm not a Wikipedia, as some of the candidates have said. So as important as they may seem to be, I would just add a comma there and say that they're not essential. They're important. We qualified people to various rounds based on various scores. But at the end of the day, in order to make a good decision, this is a decision about people. Yeah. So you need to take into consideration also elements that are not quantifiable in points.
Дуже дякую. Будь ласка.
Thank you. Yes, sure. Please.
Well, let me switch to Ukrainian. Я вважаю, що в принципі системи
I think that
багато, дуже майже всі
systems
і професійні якості можуть бути піддані обрахунку.
exist which can quantify almost all human qualities. They do exist, but we cannot use them for short competition procedures. We every time had to write the rules of our work from the scratch. We needed to define the procedure, the rules of voting. We're grateful to those who were before us. We used their experience, but we had to do a lot. If this is a standing committee, then maybe it's possible. I think, or I hope that another law on competition selection will be made, and that will be used for civil service or maybe for some other positions as well. That would be wonderful, because here we would have some clear picture for the commissioners, for the candidates. So far, we don't have it. It's not that I'm advocating that, because we cannot have the guarantees that the law will be more progressive than some of the commissions that set their own rules. Thank you. If we have no more questions, we will be saying thank you.
За вашу допомогу, за вашу увагу, інтерес, за висвітлення перебігу конкурсу.
Thank you for your help, for your interest, for your patience that you were waiting till such a late hour to communicate with us. I give floor to you, Matthew. Would you like to say something?
Very much. And let me take this opportunity to express our deepest thanks to the civil society leaders on this press conference and others who may not have been able to attend from their very diligent efforts to provide us information, structure, advice as we proceeded into this very challenging and complex area. There's just such a wealth of expertise among these groups, and they came from day one ready to help with very sharp tools and good insights. So we do want to express our thanks. Let me also take this opportunity to express in alphabetical order my thanks to my deputy commissioners, starting with Alla Ivanovska, Andrei Kozlov, Natalia Onyshenko, Tatiana Suvina, and Laura Stefan. This has been a great journey. I hope we can meet again on this road at some point and work together. And then finally, last but not least, what an incredible secretariat we have, led by Svetlana Kolomiets. Svetlana, you are a multitasker like I've never met. You have great legal skill, great emotional intelligence, great writing abilities, and very good at organizing what has been an exceptional team of support. They've been friendly. They've been there working very hard, the technical team. And then again, finally, to the translators, you've been with us from the beginning. This is not easy to translate this subject matter, and it's greatly, greatly appreciated by all of us.
Дякую.
Дякую.
Thank you, thank you.